Hey everybody, Yankee here. Tonight I want to talk about the common use trap. You know, this argument that people have used for years to defend things like the AR-15 and other firearms, saying that if they're in common use, they're obviously constitutionally protected. They're protected under the Second Amendment. And because courts have given that argument weight in the past, people have gotten used to using it. And they think, this is a good argument because if a lot of people use it, it obviously can't be unconstitutional. But unfortunately, when the courts accept that as a metric for whether something is protected by the Second Amendment, well, then the inverse is true as well. If it's not in common use, they can use that as an indication that it is not protected by the Second Amendment. And we're seeing that being used against us right now. The DOJ, Trump's DOJ, is trying to overturn the ruling from the Mississippi federal judge who said that the NFA is unconstitutional because there's no historic precedent that would allow the government to restrict fully automatic weapons. And the DOJ is saying, yes, but these guns, these automatic weapons, they're not in common use, therefore they're not protected by the Second Amendment. See, they're using the inverse of the AR-15s are in common use, so they must be protected. Fully automatic weapons aren't, so they aren't protected. And here's the thing. Anytime they want to be able to say something's not in common use, well, they just either have to make them illegal for a while and delay the fight and say, well, look, nobody's got them now, so they're not in common use. Or they can run the manufacturer of those products out of business. Or just make it really hard to sell them, to make sure people don't have them, and then they can use that argument, these aren't in common use. You know what else isn't in common use? Short barrel rifles. You could easily make the argument that they're not in common use. Short barrel shotguns. You can easily make the argument they're not in common use. You know, anything that has to have an NFA tax stamp could be said to not be in common use. When you look at how many people own this gun. Look at how many people own a Glock or a Smith & Wesson revolver. And then compare the number of people that actually have short barrel shotguns. It's such a tiny little number compared to what is the norm. So it's not common use. So therefore we can ban it. Which is a ridiculous argument to say something's not in common use, like a fully automatic rifle, when it's been pretty much banned for the longest time. Can't make new ones for civilian use. The ones that exist cost so much money that most people would have to sell their house to buy one. And then they say, well, see, they're not in common use. People aren't buying them because they can't. So anything that's in the NFA, the government could make an argument they're not in common use. Suppressors. Not most people don't own a suppressor. Not many of them. There's not many people that do. Most gun owners don't own suppressors. So they can say, well, if the vast majority of gun owners don't have these, they're not common. And we're seeing that time and time again. These lawyers and everything else that are supposedly pro-gun, you know, they come up with these schemes sometimes that either backfire unintentionally or they were crafted from the very beginning to give the government an out. And the common use argument is one of those. So we need to quit using them. And the reason I'm saying this tonight is because, like I said, the DOJ is using that argument to overturn the Mississippi ruling that says the NFA is unconstitutional. They'll probably use that argument many times in the coming future. Not just this administration, but future administrations will continue to use that argument. But under Bruen, the court said that the true merit is whether there's a historic precedent for the ban. There is no historic precedent of certain types of rifles or firearms being banned throughout history. You know, during the time of the founding fathers, that's when it would have to have been happening. It has to have a historic relevance, a historic similarity to a law that existed when the founders were around. That's the true metric. That was what Bruen said. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court doesn't seem interested in enforcing their own decision because there's so many laws on the books right now that violate that, but they ain't doing nothing about it. And when they get a chance to do something about it, they're like, oh, we're going to pass on that right now because we don't want to make an unpopular decision. You know, That's crap. Crap. Doesn't matter if it's popular, unpopular, if it's constitutional, it needs to be settled. And they need to use their own metric that they decided under Bruen to settle things. And the common use argument is one we all need to stop using. We need to say it doesn't matter if something's common use. If there's no historic precedent for banning it, a citizen should be able to have it. A citizen should definitely be able to have anything any member of a law enforcement department can have. And anything an individual soldier can carry and operate, you should be able to own. Anything an individual soldier can drive or fly, you should be able to own. I'm a firm believer of that. Now, most people won't, and unfortunately, with the way our government runs right now, there'll be 1%ers out there that are buying their own private little armies. That's a possibility. That's something we got to watch out for. But I still believe in the principle. I can't say I don't, simply because some people will be able to use it and most people won't. But, you got to stick to principles sometimes and then you work it out later. But as I was saying, the common use argument, stop using it. Start saying it doesn't matter if it's common. The reason it's not common is because it's too expensive, or it's not available, or it's illegal, or you got to go through 1,000 hoops to get it. Something we should have constitutionally been able to have all along, but we've been denied for a long time, so now it's not in common use. Doesn't mean it's not protected by the Second. It just means that for a very long time, they've got away with restricting something they shouldn't have been able to.